So as we try to combine the stories of Steve and Tiffany and Stan in whatever order they mix up, and frame that in the concept of SPRX, service, purpose, resilience, and experience. Mm-hmm. Each one of them shared elements of how they found resilience, but also how they wanted a different experience than they actually got in some ways, or they wanted a different experience for their loved one than they got. What is your thought on that?
You know, the thing that really struck out to me was to be heard.
Yeah.
Just please listen, hear the words, hear the intentions if I don't have the words. And the fact that everyone was feeling like, even in this country, in healthcare and beyond, that their voices are just crumbled.
I want you to know me.
Right.
Not the patient, not the symptoms, not the medical record.
The medical intimacy part. That's a scary word.
Well, it means we're going to have to get connected.
Right.
And we've always talked about professional boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
But then where do we connect that back to our own vulnerability and our own authenticity to show up real and then get real?
And I think some of the disconnect that we're experiencing, and perhaps some of the issues that we're having with folks leaving the workplace, is because we're taking some of the humanness out of our work. We're expecting people, it feels like, to be almost robotic in the nature in which we're providing the care, but still provide the care and be loving, but don't connect. And so then where do you go with all of that?
We start playing by the rules. And that's maybe not the right way. We get playing to the rules. Mm-hmm. We should all play by them, but we start playing to them as if that's the end game, as opposed to showing up with this compassion, this authenticity, this vulnerability, and creating an experience in the workplace, but also at the point of care that resonates with people, that connects with people. People who are connected and engaged don't leave their work. Patients who are connected and engaged with their providers have a great experience.
And I think to look at ourselves, of those of us who are in leadership positions, and to actually lean into that, even though it feels uncomfortable. You almost feel like you have to have a wall around you when you're a leader sometimes, but to actually lean into that connectedness and actually show that with the staff that you work with. And so that way they feel comfortable to do that with the patients under their care.
Am I vulnerable as a leader? Am I authentic as a leader? And am I approachable in that authenticity? Because that's an uncomfortable space, and somebody will take advantage of it.
And can I have those courageous conversations? We can't keep losing the good people that came into this for the right reasons.
People are opting out. Mm-hmm. I don't want to play to the rules. Mm-hmm. What I want to do is deliver care. I want to connect to patients. I want to connect to the people that do the work. That is why people show up. And that's why they stay there. And the only thing worse than the opting out of our industries of healthcare is the presenteeism, where I'm going to show up, but I'm just mailing it in. I'm not really here. Did my whole person show up? And have we created a work culture where my whole person can show up and I feel like that's safe?
And do they have an outlet to go to when they are having those moments of feeling that connectedness and losing a patient or having a very difficult conversation, and then feeling like there's a safety net to go to kind of fill yourself back up and to
Absolutely.
be able to take that step into that next room?
Yeah, I mean, what do I do when it's a lousy day? Mm-hmm. What do I do when I probably shouldn't be at work? Do we make it okay for folks to not be okay and give them that outlet so that they're able to really show up in the best way possible? We're asking a lot of people. And are we giving them the best of ourselves to create an environment where that's really fostered and nurtured? We don't talk about nurturing very much.
One of the things that really struck me from the conversation was the word burden.
Yeah, each person brought it up or they used a different word for it, but they all talked about burden today.
Burden as myself needing care. I don't want to be a burden on the system. I don't want to be a burden on the system right now when the system is already so complicated. No. I don't want to be a burden on you, my husband, because this is just too much for you.
Right.
And
as a spouse, as a friend.
I think we need to understand
patient.
When people are facing some of these life-limiting and chronic illnesses that, as human beings, we don't want a burden, right? We want to
Right.
survive. We want to thrive. We want to be the best we can be. We want to be able to handle everything that we have around us and that we're supposed to be responsible for. And the minute that shifts and we need that support, people are kind of walking in with that feeling of I'm already just too much.
So how do we make a space for that as leaders? Find our own resilience, show up vulnerable, show up compassionate, have the courage to be authentic and lead in that way. We're asking a lot of ourselves, but if we don't do it, we're going to continue to have people leave. Mm-hmm. And I think we're not going to be able to create the experience for people that they want and that I want. I want to work in an environment like that.
I don't think the stories of Tiffany, the patient, of Stan, the one left behind, or of Steve, the current caregiver, are all too different than those that are in those current roles that we may know.
My guess is there are folks going to watch this. These stories resonate with them. They may personally identify. Mm-hmm. They know a Stan or a Steve. They know a Tiffany somewhere. This is their story or the story of someone they've treated. These are not concepts. These are people.
And what do we do to make it okay for the people like Tiffany to feel like they have somebody to turn to, the patient, when you are facing that life-limiting illness and you want to look down all the different possibilities and have somebody there that can be a sounding board if you're looking at no treatment as an option. It doesn't matter that I might be 40 some odd years old as she is. I need to look at that option. How do we make that okay? How do we become comfortable with that?
She needed some fearlessness. She needed a provider to overcome the fear of talking about death. And it's scary. It's hard listening to her talk about it. Mm-hmm. But we need to be fearless in our vulnerability with our patients, fearless in that authenticity.
And not put what our desires and wishes are for maybe our own selves, if we were in the situation, onto somebody else. And that's hard to do too. If it's hard to remove your lens.
Well, I'm glad that they shared those stories with us.
Me too.
I'll remember them. So now we're going to open this up to you, the audience, in a new virtual conference way. That means you can engage with Nicole and I in answering your questions, or at least just opening some discussion that way. I don't know that we have all the answers to your questions, but in a new virtual conference way, let's send questions, let's open some dialogue, and maybe we'll learn from one another.